We're here today to announce exciting legislation in a year that gender equity in the workplace is on the forefront of all of our minds. It's amazing that the state of California has allowed for gender inequities to exist in our workers' compensation law. Being a woman in the workplace should never be a pre-existing condition, and gender bias in the workplace should be forbidden. We think with AB 305, we can get at some of the inequities that have been faced by women since workers' compensation reform in 2004 and eliminate those biases so that women are treated the same as men when it comes to workers' compensation and disability. California has always been a leader on workforce equity issues, so it's shocking that we allow this law to stand. And we're going to take it on this year. But I'm glad that I'm not taking it on alone.
After decades of struggles for equality, that in the year 2015, we have to shine a light on gender bias in workers' compensation. The California workers' compensation insurance system penalizes women in many different ways. The problem of apportionment. Currently, the Labor Code and case law allows doctors and judges to reduce injured women's permanent disability compensation due to pre-existing conditions and/or risk factors, regardless of whether the condition was symptomatic before the work injury. AB 305 would make it unlawful to reduce women's compensation due to gender-based factors of pregnancy, breast cancer, menopause, osteoporosis, and sexual harassment. A female injured housekeeper whose uterus dropped as a result of lifting a heavy bed should not have her permanent disability compensation significantly reduced because she previously bore children. A female injured mechanical designer who developed carpal tunnel syndrome should not have substantial reduction of her permanent disability compensation because she is postmenopausal. Women are doing many dangerous jobs, such as firefighters, peace officers, and construction workers. But the workers' compensation insurance system lags behind. Discriminatory policies are deeply embedded in the workers' compensation system, as evidenced by the facts that carpal tunnel syndrome, a disorder that disproportionately affects females, too often has a disability rating of 0%, zero compensation. It is hard to believe that a female firefighter who spends decades serving the public at the expense of her own health gets a 0% disability rating after years of toxic exposure and undergoing a double breast mastectomy due to breast cancer. But a male firefighter who spends the same amount of years serving the public at the expense of his own health gets a 16% permanent disability rating for removal of his prostate due to years of exposure to the same toxins and developing prostate cancer.
We represent 14,000 hardworking employees within the University of California system. Most of these employees are women who are administrative and clerical support. They frequently suffer cumulative trauma injuries, including carpal tunnel syndrome. Our union also represents tens of thousands of California women who work as UPS package delivery workers, food processing workers, cannery workers, and other jobs that frequently result in injuries. Thousands of these workers are women, some of them doing difficult jobs that result in injuries. Our union is co-sponsoring this bill because we want our women members to be treated with the same dignity, respect, and fairness we demand for our Teamster men. Our members suffer work injuries that include back and knee injuries from getting into and out of trucks as often as 150 times each day while carrying packages. Cannery workers and food processing workers sustain repetitive motion injuries, cumulative injuries from doing the same tasks over and over, day after day. Women food processors and cannery workers in California also have elevated risk of breast cancer. They're exposed to pesticides and other cancer-causing chemicals daily. It is of great concern to us that women who are injured at work receive less than fair treatment. We look forward to working to pass AB 305 and ending one form of discrimination in workers' compensation insurance. It is time to end discrimination. I would like you all to stand with me in all forms and treat all California workers equally. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tammy. I've worked as a peace officer for 15 years. I love my job and am proud to serve and protect the public. I've worked in the field on patrol and in air operations, along with many other duties. I was exposed to cancer-causing chemicals in many situations. I was often exposed to hazardous material spills, vehicle fires, forest fires, ammunition, exhaust fumes, gasoline, diesel fuel, structure fires, and narcotics. Last October, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which resulted in me having to undergo a double mastectomy. There is no feeling, and my body is missing important organs. I have filed a claim for workers' compensation, insurance to provide medical care, and compensation for my permanent disabilities. But I'm told that the book used to determine my permanent impairment allows at most a base rating of 5%. The amount of permanent disability compensation for the loss of both of my breasts is worth at most $6,960. Does that seem adequate and fair? I'm going to fight for the right to have my work injury covered by the insurer. I'm hoping that I'm not discriminated against and have my disability compensation reduced because of my bias against women. I carried the same weight on my duty belt as my male colleagues, confronted the same dangers in the workforce, worked just as hard, and it is not fair for me and my fellow female officers to be penalized for our gender. Thank you.
As we all know, being a woman is no longer a medical pre-existing condition under the Affordable Care Act. And yet, in California, workers' comp law, my pregnancy is considered a pre-existing medical condition. Now, I remember being pregnant and meeting President Obama and telling him that they needed to do something about this. And when I introduced him to my child, I said, I fought my insurer until she was teething to get certain conditions covered. And he said, we'll get it done. And it did happen at the federal level. It did happen at the federal level, thanks to our Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, our President Barack Obama, and people throughout the country who stood up and said medical discrimination against women is wrong. And yet, we come home to California to find that workers like Tammy, who work an honest day and who get fair pay, all of a sudden don't get compensated from her injuries, versus if she was a man, if she were a man, she would receive the same compensation. We find that to be wrong. We were frankly surprised and outraged at the California Democratic Party Women's Caucus when we first started studying this issue. When our friends at CAAA and the Teamsters came to us and said, will you start to work with us on this? We couldn't believe it, that it was actually the law in California, and that so-called reforms had discriminated against women. And that is why we started the education process with our members, and we voted unanimously in November on a resolution to modernize the workforce and ending gender bias.
So today we're announcing a bill that, as chair of the Select Committee on Women in the Workplace, it's important to me as a legislator that the state of California does not allow discrimination that we say other people shouldn't have. We are a state that needs to live our values. But as the daughter of a nurse who, after 40 years, 20 of which was spent in interventional radiology, developed breast cancer and ultimately died from that disease despite the fact that there was no family history, this is deeply personal for me. Nurses in particular, along with women who are in peace officer situations, women who do jobs every day that require lifting, pulling, exposure to toxic chemicals, should have the same protections as a man whose prostate cancer rating is much higher than a breast cancer rating.